We're going to move on. I'm running a little late here, but maybe you've seen a version of this. Yeah. So this is another way of looking at it. I talked about ego to eco earlier. So is everything here to serve you, or are you a facet of the whole that we're talking about right now? Our system is kind of geared this way. And so how do we make the transition from that to that? And how do we actually do this? How do we move from our current reality to what Charles Eisenstein calls the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible? We're hardwired toward perception by differentiation, either or, this or that, black or white, yellow or blue. And I would submit again that it is a both and conversation. That it's yellow and blue, or black and white. And when you think about it, I like to use color because, and I chose this example especially for you guys. So say I'm on the yellow team over here, and then there's the blue team over here, and the yellows are going yellow, 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 and the blues are going blue, 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 but there's somebody saying, well, both. Yes, yellow. Yes, blue.
Green.
You got it. You hold both of those together. Something brings them together, and you've got green. And you might not anticipate green by putting blue and yellow together, but you'll never get to that thing you don't anticipate if you don't say yes to both sides of the equation. So part of the shift from eco to whole systems, to integrated systems, and their thinking is by developing capacities in ourselves to be able to do the both and thing. And I think that's actually a capacity that we embody. And when we can do that in ourselves, we can do that out in the world as well. Because we're the people creating the out there in the world. You know, it's each of us as human beings. It's not some imaginary something out there that we can't, it's the them. It's them, they're doing it. But it's us. And so we need these capacities to sort of midwife these new ways, these new things like another column, into existence. Next. I love this little quote by Cynthia Bourgeault. Both and is a precious, energetic boost to a world dashing itself on the rocks of either or. And so how do we do this? How do we do the paradigm shift that Andrew was talking about earlier? Who's doing it? It's people, you and I. So we're going to briefly touch in with one of these things in the exercise that we're going to do it. And I would submit to you that our brains actually have a tough time doing the both and piece. And that we need to use other capacities that we all have. We just don't necessarily listen to them or spend the time to do them. So we're going to just do a quick exercise just sitting in our chairs. You can stand up and do this and move around if you want, but I don't know if we have time to do that quite. So how do we see and know? How do we start to shift what we believe we know to what it can be, and to bring this up into something that bring this up into our consciousness so that we're thinking about it and aware of it. I saw this video recently of this fellow whose name I can't pronounce, Martinez. The biggest challenge we face is shifting human consciousness, not saving the planet. The planet doesn't need saving, we do. And so maybe it comes from how we know these things and where we know them from. So no one ever went out and said, I'm about to go out and create an oppressive system. You know, that didn't happen. It grew out of some fundamental decisions that they made consciously or unconsciously. And like I said, it hasn't always been this way. So what I was noticing in myself several years ago is that if I made decisions strictly from what my head was telling me, that I often stepped wrong. When I started to learn other vocabularies in myself, particularly, and you know, I'm just going to do a sort of a woo-woo factor disclaimer here. I'm going to talk about things like heart and guts and body and stuff like that. But it's very grounded, it's very connected, it's not about emotion even, it's about actual physical sensation and what our bodies are telling us, very literally. And so when I learned the vocabulary of my heart and I understood what was going on there, I started to step more accurately and more in the direction of things that I wanted to do and that fit better with me and with people around me and the planet and as a whole. And so for me, I actually get a physical feeling of heat when I'm moving in the right direction. When I sort of inquire in and I say, okay, should I do this? And my head will go back and forth like this, right? And if I feel heat here and I do that thing, then it's the right thing for me. If I feel sort of flat and gray and nothing, neutral, then I don't do that. Even if my head is saying, yeah. But if I listen to my head, it ends up being the wrong decision. It's an observation that I had. And same with sort of our gut level reactions and so on. So we're going to do a fairly quick 4-part exercise, just an experiment. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. This is the piece where my personal interest goes deepest, is in how, you know, what we're doing inside ourselves is manifesting out there. If we're somebody who's beating ourselves up all the time, and, you know, lots of negative self-talk or whatever, and you're not noticing that and understanding how that's going to affect what you're doing out there, then it would be helpful to start noticing that. So the first is really easy. This is about head, and we're used to this. We're used to being in our heads. It's accepted, normal, common, valued, and, you know, we do our thinking, our pondering, understanding, picturing, hearing, seeing. And when we say those things, we usually mean from our heads. So I want you to just, if you want to close your eyes, you can, but you could actually keep your eyes open and see. Try and keep your attention above your shoulders. And just notice what that feels like and how you see things and what they look like and what sensations you notice. You can move around, turn your head, look at the room. So, re-emerging from that for a moment. Anybody want to share anything that happened when they were doing that?
I have to admit it was a bit blank, so.
Bit blank.
I just noticed the physical sensation of my head, like
Yeah.
just how I'm feeling, and yeah, just I won't tell you what it was, but I just was aware of the physicality of my head, like my neck stiff, my whatever. Because when you pay attention to something, you notice things.
Yes. Thank you for that. Anybody else?
It's sort of nice. I noticed the visual things, like the light and things that were moving. So it seems to be very focused on
Yeah.
visual things.
Yeah, and me too. In this moment when I was doing it, I was noticing angles and straight lines and sharpnesses. That's visually, that's what was coming forward for me. Anybody else?
Feel the air conditioner on my face. Also, it's lightheaded.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna shift. This is part 2. So we're gonna take our attention from here, and we're gonna drop it to here. And so, if you can't, if you feel like you can't do this, just pretend. And act as if you have eyes coming out of your chest, out of your heart, that you're actually seeing with your heart. A friend of mine is an osteopath, and he was telling me that the top of our nervous system is actually not our brains. When we're still a little tiny embryo, our hearts are at the top of the nervous system. And at some point in our development, it shifts down to be in our chests. And there are actually more signals, what are they called? Electrical things, from our hearts to our brains than there are from our brains to our hearts. The heart actually physically does more work in that regard than our brains do. And we all know, we know about the language of our hearts. We say things like, my heart just dropped, right? That's a physical sensation that we have felt that we're articulating. And it's like, that person's really fiery-hearted, or my heart feels full, or, you're heartbroken. So I'm not pointing to emotional reactions to things. I'm pointing to the actual physical sensations that we experience in our bodies. And that is a vocabulary that we can learn and be guided by. So, taking a moment, you can stand up if it's easier. And so drop your attention down into this part of your body and see from here. Just sort of notice what that feels like. And maybe you don't feel anything. The very first time I did this, I felt nothing. It was just kind of shut down for me at that point. So take a deep breath and just sort of re-emerge from that. Anybody want to share anything that happened for them there?
I'm not usually conscious of my own heart beating, but there it was.
Yay! Yeah, thank God. We don't have to think about beating our heart all the time, right? Yeah.
My arms were warm.
Yes.
They felt like they were getting warm. It's not that I noticed that they were already warm.
Right.
They got warm.
Interesting. Yeah, I've heard that one before too, and tingling also. Anybody notice any tingling or anything like that? Part of their heart language. Yes. Anybody else?
One thing I noticed that in the first one with the head, I seemed to be much more aware of the physical space around me, and I mean, I had my eyes closed with the second one, but I noticed more the fact that I was in a group of people. Like it was more about the people, it seemed.
Beautiful. Yeah. Yes.
Maybe it's ironic, but when I was, when we were working with the heart space, and I'm from Kootenays, so working with heart space is a lot easier. So I can really get into it, and I actually found, I was just looking around, like how was I reacting to where I was from here, and it was bringing up memories for me more so than when I was in my headspace thinking about what I was looking at. When I, like, your water bottle, George, reminded me of something funny that happened, and and it brought up a humorous moment, but it came from when I was really tapping in here, not when I was like looking at everything, trying to make connection to it.
Cool. Anybody else? When I was first learning about this stuff, I had the job of editing a newsletter, and paper newsletter back in the day. And somebody submitted an article, and I'm reading it, and I'm going, what the heck is this thing about? Like, it just seemed like one long run-on sentence to me. And I thought, I'm going to try this experiment. And I just heard about this thing, and I said, I'm going to try and read it from my heart instead of my head. So I just pretended I knew how to do that. And I dropped my attention, and I sat back from my computer, and I read the article. And it became crystal clear to me. And I was shocked that that was the outcome of doing that. And I said, it just needs like 5 subheadings. And just to divide it up so it's just a little clearer where the different subject areas are. That's all it needed. And at first I thought it was going to be a complete rewrite or something like that. So I'm telling you that because my experience is that this has very practical applications. It's not just about being good, although sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes what you're picking up there is like, no, thanks. Does anybody know Neil Gaiman as an author? You do? Yeah, my daughter's into Neil Gaiman books. He writes kind of this sort of weird stuff. But somehow he also seems to have a real insight into sort of humanity, if you will. And this is a quote of his. It says, the moment that you feel, I'll try again. The moment that you feel that, just possibly, you're walking down the street naked, exposing too much of your heart and your mind, and what exists on the inside, showing too much of yourself, that's the moment you may be starting to get it right. It makes me feel uncomfortable. I was like, anyway. Okay, so we're going to go into part 3 of this. You may have guessed where we're going now. We keep dropping down. So just take a deep breath. And again, you might want to stand up for this one in particular. So we're dropping from here down to gut level or whole body if you can manage that. But if you don't want to get into that, just sort of, so putting your eyes, just dropping them from your head now to your heart, now down here. And seeing with your body. There's a whole field of study called somatic experiencing that's exploring this realm right now. And what kind of vocabularies are coming. Somatic means, som means body. What connecting with things from that place, what happens there. And you'll be familiar with things like gut feeling, or tingling all over, or that gave me goosebumps, or I felt shivers. Those are the kinds of words that come out when our bodies are telling us something on that level. If it's tough, take a deep breath. Okay, and just come back in the room. So anybody want to share how that was? I discovered I was thirsty.
I felt sort of heavy.
Heavy. Heavy as in too heavy, or grounded, connected heavy?
Just like a sense that, like feeling my own weight of my body, and just feeling like gravity
Like
has an
this.
effect on me.
like this. And when you start to get it, it's tricky, you know, when you start not being able to find the words to describe these things, you're probably getting there, because you start wanting to do things like this to describe it, because it's tough to find the words. Anybody else?
I sort of had a sense of connectedness, kind of like so it was probably that heaviness as well, kind of sinking into the space around me, sort of, and belonging maybe.
I noticed that I feel safe
Safe. Beautiful.
here now, that is.
Here now, present.
Yeah, in this room.
Right. Cool. Yes?
Well, I was gonna say that in this room, I find it hard to relate to those things a little bit, but
Mhm.
I understand the feeling, like when I'm outdoors, I can tell when I'm thinking in my head or going through the doors and feeling maybe gutted if I see something in this, I'm just crossing against nature, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you're right. I think some of these things are easier to access when we're out in natural, even just, you know, sitting by our houseplants. You know, if nothing else, can be a little trickier in these kinds of contexts. So getting to the point of integration and wholeness, the last exercise is we're going to do all three of them. So I'm going to draw you a little person. It's going to be very, you know, a happy person. So we're going to integrate head, heart, body as kind of an integrative way of coming to the room in this case. So again, take a deep breath. Get comfy, stand up if you feel that would be easier or better or different or whatever. And just do the whole thing. Okay, then just have a seat. Take a deep breath. Anybody want to talk about how that was for them? Yeah.
It was interesting, I kept finding myself trying to have equal weighting between all three. And so then I was like, sort of feeling constantly unbalanced and
Yeah.
recognizing that place of not seeking all the time, all the information that I'm emitting,
Right.
but just kind of, you know, learning to, I'm in this place personally where it's like I can tap into it now when I need some cue. Okay, I'm having trouble. But if I consciously sit with all of it all the time, there's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on.
It's pretty, like a little,
Yeah,
almost
yeah.
unsettling.
And you're right.
To
And
pay
so,
attention to all of it at once.
Anybody else? Yeah.
My head was refusing to give up control. I couldn't get the other two going.
Uh-huh. Who's the boss here? Yeah, yeah. I've been in this process of trying to shift the who's the boss here from here to here. And, you know, not ditching this, again, it's about integration, but letting my head inform this instead of this informing that. That's me. Anybody else?
I sort of felt, I don't know if it's the right word, like sort of energized, like I was sort of taking in more than before we did this exercise. Somehow.
Cool.
Yeah, similar for me, more like awake or alert.
Yeah.
Cool. So again, I think because becoming aware of these languages, we'll each have different, there are similarities between people for sure, we're all human beings. But as we become aware of what the different things that we're feeling mean, you largely would have to do that through experimentation, then you can use that as part of your work, part of your relationships with people, part of creating a new economy that, what was the paradigm shift thing you were talking about, Andrew, is that what we're moving toward isn't ditching what we were doing before, but integrating it and moving it to something new that's working better for us. This came out of a conversation recently with Tad Hargrave I mentioned earlier. The current dominant system is a result of not doing inner work. We've all been colonized and have wounds and reactions and out of balance things that cause us to act in ways that are reactive, that are out of integrity, that are not regenerative, and so we react out of fear, and then those things are institutionalized. And then the colonized become the colonizers. The current system is an oppressive system, and we design systems that are reflections of ourselves. So the more we can do that kind of work, that kind of awareness of ourselves, the more people will be out there doing work that's cleaner and clearer and more in alignment with what will move us toward something we can sustain on a single planet. That whole thing about Canadians, there's 1.8 hectares available to support one person. Is that what you were saying, Andrew? I think it was 1.8 hectares, and Canadians use 7. That was you.
Yeah. 2.7 and Canadians use 7.
Yeah.
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 And there's 1.8.
That's a lot. So I think it's worth the effort, personally, to do that kind of thing. So we're just going to take a 5-ish minute break here, and then we'll move into the tools and practices for the new economy and getting back into our heads. Taking in information about things like sharing economy, peer-to-peer lending, clean economy, local economy, impact investing, social entrepreneurialism, reskilling, and so on.